The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Summer. And there's my first slide. I'm going to speak very quickly, and I want to give a very broad overview of how we will get to net zero, and to go into the full depth and the full extent of what really needs to change, because it's not minor. At least it's now recognized that we have a climate emergency. The latest data is showing very clearly that it's induced by us and our development and our use of fossil fuels. I'm going to do it in 3 diagrams. This first diagram is really about the reduction over time of our carbon emissions, and this reminds me to say how there are some early gains we can get in now and over the next few years as engineers to help restore equilibrium. Early gains, I don't know if you can read it, but as engineers alone on our projects, how we can decarbonize, change the materials we're using, be more effective and efficient. But if we work with our architects and change the definition of what we're trying to do, and if we work with our clients to actually really think what outcomes they want and how we can change the type of project that we need to give them, we can cut carbon more and more. So we have to go well beyond just the materials we use. But still, we have the rest of the problem. We have a bit more time to solve the rest of the problem, but that problem is a massive problem. We know that nature around us is already collapsing, the polar regions and so on, and we know there is no real technological magic bullet. They're not magic bullets. We've got some bullets, but they're no magic ones, and the costs are huge. We know that our prosperity that we kind of live for is driven by consumption development. So we have to change how we consume, how we develop. And we know money is the big valued thing that drives the economy. These are problems for us in terms of making major change. We don't really value enough future generations. We think we do, but we don't sacrifice enough for future generations. And the government takes the short-term view. My second diagram is about this, the tipping point, this need for massive change, and the red and moving to the green. We have to pull down the red. We've got to decline a lot and build up the new green. On the left, you've got these stimuli. It's important that we can see. Fortunately, unfortunately, the climate emergency is visible. The declining health, and COVID is a clue. Declining security through fires, through flood, and changes in weather patterns, in food insecurity, and social instability that's coming out of that. So we're seeing things which will drive change. Those drivers are not just technical changes, technical opportunities to do new things, to capture carbon, to create new materials. Social change, what people are demanding is changing, and what they'll buy and put their money towards. What risk means. Climate is now such a risk that investors are no longer wanting to invest in buildings, in infrastructure projects, constructions that could impact on climate change. Businesses are starting to think differently about their overall values and how they change what they do. And even governments are declaring net zero, although a lot of that is really with great nervousness that it means they'll have to change the way the economy runs. So what can we do? We've got to face the facts. All engineers, especially who understand more complex systems, they need to think beyond their normal frame of reference into wider frames of reference. We've got the ability to do that. So as well as reducing carbon in our own practice, in our own research, we've got to seek ways to change the brief and raise the ambitions of the outcomes of any of our work. And more than anything, we've really got to think now about the future, about people and the planet. We've got to think differently. We've got to change our values as to what we really value, and influence at every level. What we need is this paradigm shift. We need to make changes across the board. And the third diagram, therefore, is Kate Raworth's Donut. If you can get hold of, if you haven't read it, Donut Economics, it starts to reframe the world around us in a way that I think is very, very valuable. The green is the place we need to be on this diagram. It's the place where we're building a safe and just space for humanity. It means that we're not exceeding the ecological ceiling, where we harm the environment, harm the planet, but it means we are providing, we're not falling into the hole in the middle, which is falling short on the social provision that people have the right to. And that means we have to start thinking a lot more about the less well-developed world and their rights to a better life. And that means that some of our overconsumption in the so-called global north we have to start to compromise. And then, so really, what does this look like? Well, I think that if you want to be optimistic, you could say that massive investment will be needed. We need to shift money toward new technologies. We need to think differently about how we educate people so they really understand a lot more than the narrow fields that we teach in now. How does the world work? We need industry to have new values and think about future generations. We need investment and capital to be put in places which will value future generations and value the planet. We have to limit what capital is allowed to do. We need to globally coordinate because this is a global issue. It's no good one country solving its notional problem. Boundaries, climate knows no boundaries. That's a tricky one. Prioritizing global health over minority wealth is a big hurdle for us to overcome. So I said I didn't want to underplay how difficult this is, but if you ask a question about how do we reach net zero, it isn't about tinkering at the edges. It's fundamental change. I'll just say it's got to be done. It's worth doing. Lives are better as a result. And I wanted to just point you to the Living Building Challenge, pulling back into a sort of real world. What do we do in the next few years? Look up Living Building Challenge, and it sets out some very good targets to achieve on projects in your